Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about 5 late-round players to stash for fantasy football in 2021. Inside of this video, like I said, I'm going to be talking about 5 players, 3 running backs, as well as 2 wide receivers that I feel like you guys should be drafting later in your 2021 fantasy football drafts that could eventually eclipse the bench and get into your starting lineup, aside from one of these guys who I think you may actually be able to start week number 1 of the 2021 fantasy football season. If you guys do end up enjoying this video where I talk about a bunch of late round players going around pick 100 based upon current underdog average draft position, ADP, please make sure you hit that subscribe button down below, because not only is it free, I put out a ton of content just like this every single day to help you guys win your 2021 fantasy football championship. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So the first guy I want to be talking about here is running back Gus Edwards of the Baltimore Ravens, current underdog ADP 108.8. This guy is by far and away my favorite handcuff for fantasy football in 2021, unless of course you include Kareem Hunt as a handcuff like some people do. To me, that's an idiotic statement. Kareem Hunt is drafted in the 5th round. No one drafts a fucking handcuff in the 5th round. It's because Kareem Hunt has so much standalone value in that offense. That's why he is technically, in my opinion, not a handcuff. So Gus Edwards is on the Baltimore Ravens, which in my opinion should continue to be one of the more run-heavy teams in the NFL. If they weren't top 5 in run percentage in 2021, frankly, I would be quite shocked. Either one, that means that Lamar Jackson probably just fucking passed away or something, because he's the reason why they run the ball so much, or that J.K. Dobbins and Gus Edwards forget how to play the running back position, because frankly, I don't see any of that happening, and I think that the Baltimore Ravens will continue to run at such a heavy pace every single game. Last year in 16 games, Gus Edwards finished as running back 37 in PPR, 35.5 PPR, as well as running back number 28 in standard, averaging 8 PPR points per game, 7.7 half PPR points per game, and 7.4 standard points per game, meaning from a points per game perspective, Gus Bus was running back 51 in PPR, 47.5 PPR, and running back 40 in standard. So obviously those numbers are not going to get you out of the bed in the morning to go ahead and just dream of drafting Gus Edwards, but you have to think much more in depth than the stats that last year told you. I bring up last year's stats because it shows you what he has done in the past, but in reality, what you're looking at here is a different Baltimore Ravens offense, because Mark Ingram is gone. Mark Ingram was really sucking up the carries early on in last season. It's no longer a 3-headed monster running back core. It is now 2-headed by Gus Edwards as well as J.K. Dobbins. The reason why I will call Gus Edwards a stash is because while I think in a deeper league you could probably start him every once in a while, it's not going to be ideal to be starting Gus Edwards every single week, even with the amount they run the rock. Obviously, Gus Edwards, in my opinion, is not as good of a pass catcher as J.K. Dobbins, so that should end up hurting him and getting him onto the field less. And with the fact that I love J.K. Dobbins so much, obviously, I don't think that J.K. Dobbins will be off the field all that much, but at the end of the day, what I think doesn't fucking matter, because Gus Edwards is still going to be getting a whole lot of playing time in this offense due to the fact that they run the ball so much. And if you're thinking about a running back on a team that runs the ball a lot, you're going to want that. So if something was to happen to J.K. Dobbins, if Dobbins was to go down, then Gus Edwards would instantly insert himself into a role of greatness. They extended Gus Edwards. They gave him a nice contract a couple of days ago. So that means that John Harbaugh and friends in Baltimore heavily believe in the Gus Bus Edwards, and I do as well. I think that while he does kind of have standalone value, the reason why he's a stash is because if Dobbins was to go down, this guy can legitimately be a top 10 running back, because now he doesn't have Dobbins around him. He won't have any other competition for carries aside from Lamar Jackson and whoever they throw out there. But whoever they throw out there is not going to be anywhere near as good as J.K. Dobbins or Gus Edwards. So I think that Edwards has a really big opportunity, if something was to happen to Dobbins, to really put up a great season. And you would have been very happy to have drafted him pretty late in your fantasy football drafts. Last season, Gus Edwards put up 144 carries for 724 rushing yards, 14 total targets for 9 receptions, 129 receiving yards and 6 total touchdowns. So his rushing numbers were actually pretty solid. He rushed the ball 28th highest in the NFL, but still put up the 19th highest rushing yards with 724. So those numbers, while again, they aren't super sexy, they aren't the best, they do tell you that when given the rock, Gus Edwards is able to succeed. So I think that the narrative on Gus Edwards should be relatively positive. Yet he is still getting drafted behind other running backs that, in my opinion, aren't as good or having as much upside as Gus Edwards. So Gus Edwards is probably one of my favorite late-round players to stash that I'm going to be drafting in a lot of leagues in 2021. Next guy, this is going to be the player that isn't really a stash because I think he can play week number 1, and I think this guy's ADP is going to hit the fucking moon. And this guy's ADP is related to Julio Jones, and that is wide receiver Russell Gage of the Atlanta Falcons. Underdog ADP 126.9, up 23 spots across the last week on Underdog, obviously, of the Atlanta Falcons. In 16 games last year, Russell Gage finished as wide receiver 37 in PPR, as well as in half PPR, and wide receiver number 40 in standard. Averaging 11.3 PPR points per game in his sophomore season, 9.1 half PPR points per game, 6.8 standard points per game, 0.1 off of being very nice for Russell Gage. From a points per game perspective, he was wide receiver 48 in PPR, 48 in half PPR, tied with T.Y. Hilton and Michael Thomas, and wide receiver 54 in standard, tied with Kiki Cootie and Deebo Samuel. Now, Russell Gage's numbers are actually pretty solid, and after I read off his numbers from last season, I want to talk about his game splits with and without Julio Jones in the last 2 seasons, being 2019 and 2020. Russell Gage had 110 total targets last year, 6.9 per game. Very nice. I like number 22 at the wide receiver position. He had 72 receptions for 786 receiving yards and 4 total tugs on the season. So Russell Gage put up some pretty solid numbers for a wide receiver 3. Now, obviously, Julio Jones did miss some games, which we're going to be talking about, but now Julio Jones is completely taken out of that equation. Russell Gage goes from being a wide receiver 3 on the team, probably the number 4 option, right? Because with Kyle Pitts on the team, that really shoots Russell Gage down the pecking order. But now with Julio Jones gone, Russell Gage is either going to be the number 2 or number 3 option on this team, depending on how many targets Kyle Pitts is getting on a per game basis. And Russell Gage has shown us in the past that this guy is a very solid NFL wide receiver. Now, again, he's not Julio Jones, so he's not going to be like a top 10, top 15 wide receiver at the end of the year. But as a guy you can find in like the 11th round, the 12th round. In some leagues, most people don't even know who the fuck Russell Gage is, so he may even go even later. And at the end of the day, this guy can go into your lineup week 1 as your flex option, and if you drafted a bunch of running backs, maybe he'll end up being your wide receiver 2. While I wouldn't love that, I'm just saying he actually has the potential to be a wide receiver 2 because of how good this Falcons offense should be, and with how complete and utter dog shit that defense seems to be. With a bad defense, you have an offense who's going to be able to pass the ball a lot, and Matty Ice doesn't really look like he is in the point of his career where it's on a complete and utter down spiral. So the numbers I want to be talking about here are the Russell Gage splits from 2019 and 2020 with and without Julio Jones. He played in 22 games with Mr. Julio and 8 games without. In the 22 games with Julio Jones, he was averaging 6.36 half PPR points per game versus 9.47 without Julio Jones, 8.32 PPR points per game versus 11.66 without Julio Jones, 4.41 standard points per game with Julio Jones versus 7.29 without. Why is this? This is due to an uptick in targets going from 5.86 per game to 6.88, which obviously equivalates, if that's even a word, equals more receptions, 3.91 receptions per game versus 4.38 without Julio, an increased number of touchdowns, 0.09 per game versus 0.38, as well as an increase in yards, 38.18 versus 49. So obviously without Julio Jones, this should be easy to have fucking forecasted. I didn't have to whip out the crystal ball to figure this one out, that Russell Gage would be better without Julio Jones. But even so, it doesn't seem like his ADP is rising enough to where you're like, maybe do I want to take Russell Gage or do I want that other high upside wide receiver? In the range of Russell Gage, there's guys you don't want to be drafting at all, and he's sitting there all looking all nice and pretty, ready to be drafted by your team to potentially be a wide receiver 2 throughout the season. I like Russell Gage a lot. Again, I think this Atlanta offense should still be pretty solid without Julio Jones. If the defense is as bad as it has been kind of recently, I think this offense is going to have to be throwing the ball late in games, which equals more points for Mr. Russell Gage. Next up, we have running back Jamal Williams, formerly of the Green Bay Packers, now of the Detroit Lions. If you guys have ended up enjoying this video thus far, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And if you're not new, you've been watching for a while, make sure to hit that like button. I would really appreciate it. So underdog ADP right now for Mr. Jamal with 2 A's, Williams is 131.6. Now, Jamal Williams has been a handcuff basically his whole career in the NFL from 2017 until now. He was Aaron Jones's backup in Green Bay, and now he's going to be the backup to DeAndre Swift. Now, it came out that Anthony Lynn believes in this system of using the hot hand. I think that should be DeAndre Swift. But they also were talking about how in Detroit, they view Jamal Williams as the 1B to the 1A of DeAndre Swift, which to me is a clear sign that they're going to still use Jamal Williams. Last year, obviously a different head coach, so maybe I shouldn't bring that up. They didn't just use DeAndre Swift. They were still using Kerryon, still using Adrian Peterson. They were just fucking you around, and that's why a lot of people don't love DeAndre Swift going into this season. In 14 games last year for the Green Bay Packers, Jamal Williams finishes running back 39 in PPR, 39.5 PPR, as well as running back number 38 in standard, averaging 9.1 PPR points per game, 8.5 PPR points per game, and 6.9 standard points per game. Another very nice points per game here for Jamal Williams. From a points per game perspective, he was running back 39 in PPR, tied with Wayne Gallman, Latavius Murray, and Damian Harris. 43.5 PPR, tied with Sony Michel, and running back 47 in standard, tied with Giovanni Bernard and Carlos Hyde. So Jamal Williams, again, this is definitely a clear player to stash because unless DeAndre Swift gets hurt, I'm not too sure he has enough standalone value in this offense to be great. Now, maybe if the Lions didn't suck as bad as I predict them to, then you could actually start Jamal Williams week in, week out with DeAndre Swift in the lineup. But with the fact that I think this team's going to be a dumpster fire in 2021 and could compete for getting the first overall pick in the 2022 NFL draft, you probably don't want anything to do with the backup running back on that team. But you have to understand that this backup could easily become a starter and has shown good enough talent in the past to warrant being picked this late in your drafts. Last season, he had a grand total of 119 carries for 505 rushing yards, 35 targets, 31 receptions, 236 receiving yards, and 3 total touchdowns. So this guy is, while he's not necessarily getting the big targets last year or in his career or getting a big number of rushing yards, when he had to fill in for Aaron Jones, he actually did play quite well. So I do believe that Jamal Williams is a very solid handcuff in fantasy football as well as in real life. They should be very happy, the Detroit Lions, that is, in bringing in Jamal Williams. So he's a guy that I do like a lot, probably as one of my favorite handcuffs in fantasy football, which is why we're talking about him in this video. Next up, we have a guy that this dude is literally a late round stash, deep shot from 3 from fucking Curry range. Amari Rodgers of the Clemson Tigers, now of the Green Bay Packers, current underdog ADP 190.4. There's a lot of positive news coming out about Amari Rodgers out of the Green Bay camp. In years prior, we'd be talking about MVS versus Allen Lazard. We've been talking about that for what feels like the eternity at this point, but it's probably been the last 2-3 years where that's the big battle in camp. But in reality, I think that Amari Rodgers is going to surpass those bozos like it's nothing. But the question with Amari Rodgers has nothing to do with Amari Rodgers' talent. Now, I understand, Nick, he's a third-round draft pick. That doesn't necessarily mean he's going to get targets. I understand that. But the biggest worry to me is not where he was drafted in the 2021 NFL draft. It's actually where the fuck the other Rodgers is. What's happening with Aaron Rodgers? Is Aaron Rodgers going to be able to play week 1? Is Aaron Rodgers going to retire? Is he going to go to Jeopardy? Is he going to get traded? I don't know. I do not know. And if Amari Rodgers' quarterback's name is Jordan Love, and the reports don't seem the greatest about Jordan Love, and we see him play in preseason, and he doesn't look that good, then Amari Rodgers is getting taken off this board and thrown directly out the fucking window. But based upon what we know right now, with the fact that it's probably a 50-50 chance Rodgers is the guy or he isn't, I'm willing to talk about Amari Rodgers. And when I said Rodgers is the guy or not, I'm talking about Aaron Rodgers, because I do think eventually Amari Rodgers will surpass a guy like Allen Lazard or MVS as the wide receiver number 2 in what should be a very good offense with Aaron Rodgers. If you are kind of in the boat that you don't think Aaron Rodgers is going to play this year, if you think he's going to go to Denver, if you think he's going to go to Washington or something, then obviously this narrative is just dumb. It's just stupid to even talk about. But to me, where I'm not as bullish as to thinking that Rodgers is necessarily gone, Aaron Rodgers is necessarily gone, I think it's interesting to talk about Mr. Amari Rodgers, who at his final season at Clemson, he played all 4 years. He played in 12 games last season, had 77 receptions on 102 targets, 1,020 receiving yards, 13.2 yards per reception. He had a grand total of 7 touchdowns as well on the season. Now, if you look at his player profiler, this guy doesn't necessarily have the workout metrics of DK Metcalf or something, where this guy's a superhuman. He's not that. A 4.52 Pro Day 40 ranking at the 42nd percentile, 43rd percentile speed score, 27th percentile burst score, 32nd percentile agility score, and a 5th percentile catch radius. You might think that guy fucking sucks ass. Why do you even think he's going to be good? Just flip on the tape and you can see that this guy is definitely a solid player. He's not super big, only 5'9", 212 pounds, but at the end of the day, I just see a little glimmer in Amari Rodgers that I genuinely feel like he will make a big splash at the NFL level this season. Now, again, he is certainly a stash because it may take a couple of weeks for him to even supplant himself into this lineup as a guy getting targets week in and week out. But I do think that maybe come week 4, week 5, Amari Rodgers is going to be one of those guys that I am talking about to pick up off the waiver wire. So maybe you get a little lucky and you end up drafting him, even though he's basically going undrafted right now, pick 190.4. And final player I want to talk about is a guy that I didn't really want to talk about, but the more I thought about it, the more I kind of fell back in love with this man. Former running back of the Utah College, not the Utah Jazz like I almost said. Underdog ADP 98.9. But Nick, you said they were around pick 100. Pick 98.9 is around pick 100. It's just above instead of under. But, you know, that's why I said around at the beginning of the video. It's to get around what I was saying earlier. So Zack Moss of the Buffalo Bills was a rookie last season, and he was a guy that I liked a lot because, frankly, I do not believe in Devin Singletary, and a lot of people did. A lot of people were talking up Devin Singletary, still drafted him in like the 4th, 5th round of drafts, and I said that is one of the most idiotic things you can do because Devin Singletary didn't even look good in 2019 when he was the guy. Now Zack Moss is coming behind him, sniffing up his crack, and is looking to steal his goddamn job, and maybe that actually happens this season. Zack Moss kind of dealt with a couple of injuries last season that, to me, took away his chance to become the guy. In 13 games, finished as running back, 46 in PPR, 45.5 PPR, and 43 in standard, averaging 7.8 PPR points per game, 7.3 half PPR points per game, as well as 6.7 standard points per game. Meaning, from a points per game perspective, Mr. Zack Moss was running back 53 in PPR, tied with Adrian Peterson and Cam Akers, 51 in half PPR, and running back 50 in standard, tied with Alex Collins. The hope with Moss, obviously, is that Devin Singletary was to get hurt. Now, again, I don't root for fucking injuries, so I don't want Devin Singletary to get hurt. But if he was to get hurt, being the number 1 running back on an offense that's as good at moving the ball as the Buffalo Bills should be great. One of the biggest drawbacks, though, of Zack Moss and why he's going pretty late is because of Josh Allen. And it's not because of Josh Allen's inability to score and move the ball up the field. It's because this guy is a certified vulture. He's probably going to run in 6+ touchdowns next year, which obviously hurts Zack Moss's potential at the end of the season from maybe even being that vulture from Devin Singletary. But I do think Zack Moss is actually a much better running back than Devin Singletary, so that's my bet when I'm taking him, that he will actually surpass Devin Singletary on the roster as the number 1 guy for the Buffalo Bills running back core. Last year, Zack Moss had a total of 112 carries, 481 rushing yards, 18 18 targets, 14 receptions, 95 receiving yards, and 5 total touchdowns. Devin Singletary, not the best at catching passes, so that's another reason why I think Zack Moss could potentially surpass him on the roster. Now, again, there's no real numbers to back up Zack Moss. He just had a very mild 2020 NFL season, but the hope is that the team continues to get better and that maybe he actually passes up Devin Singletary, because in my opinion, Devin Singletary fucking sucks. So thank you guys all for watching. I hope you guys did end up enjoying this video. If you did end up having a great time, please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below, because again, not only is it free, I put out that content every single day to help you guys win your 2021 Fantasy Football League. Have a great rest of your guys' day. Make sure you stay safe. What is today? Happy Thursday, baby. I love you guys all. It's almost Friday. It's almost the weekend. Stay safe. I love you guys all as always. Good boy.